Captain Li Jin had never been so nervous in his entire life. The massive human spaceship called New Seoul floated silently above the alien planet Velthara. Through the thick windows, he could see the entire world sparkle like a giant diamond. Everything on this planet seemed to be made of some kind of crystal that caught light and threw it back in brilliant colors. Jin adjusted his dark blue diplomatic uniform one more time and checked his reflection. His black hair was neatly combed, and his face looked serious but friendly. This was humanity's first official meeting with the Veltari people, and he absolutely could not mess this up. Millions of people back on Earth were counting on him to make a good first impression. The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface felt like it took forever. Jin's hands were sweating as he watched the crystal cities grow larger below them. The buildings looked like they had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, but also the most alien. When the shuttle finally landed on a platform made entirely of white crystal, Jin took a deep breath and stepped out. The air smelled sweet, almost like flowers, and felt lighter than Earth air. Everything around him glowed softly, even though there was no obvious source of light. The platform led to a massive palace that stretched up into the clouds, its walls shifting between blue and purple as he watched. Dozens of Velthari people waited for him at the base of enormous crystal steps. Jin's breath caught in his throat when he saw them up close for the first time. They looked somewhat human, but their skin had a translucent quality that made them appear to glow from within. Their hair moved like it was underwater, even though there was no wind. Most striking of all were their eyes, which came in colors Jin had never seen before. At the front of the group stood someone who could only be Princess Naya. She was tall and graceful, with skin that shifted between pale blue and silver. Her long hair floated around her shoulders like liquid starlight, and her eyes were the deep purple of Earth's twilight sky. She wore flowing robes that seemed to be made of crystallized water, and a delicate crown that looked like it had been carved from a single enormous gem. The princess began walking down the crystal steps toward him, and Jin started walking up, to meet her halfway. This was the moment he had practiced 1,000 times. He knew exactly what to say, exactly how to bow, exactly how to show respect without seeming weak. Everything depended on the next few minutes. But then, disaster struck, in the most ordinary way possible. Princess Naya's foot caught on the edge of one of the crystal steps. Maybe she was nervous too, or maybe the smooth surface was more slippery than it looked. Whatever the reason, she suddenly tilted forward, her arms windmilling as she tried to catch her balance. Jin watched in horror as the most important person on this entire planet began to fall. Without thinking, without remembering any of his careful diplomatic training, Jin did what any decent person would do. He lunged forward and grabbed her arm, steadying her before she could hit the hard crystal steps. For just a moment, his warm human hand touched her cool alien skin. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Every single Velthari person on the platform gasped at exactly the same time, creating a sound like wind rushing through a cave. The princess's beautiful purple eyes went huge with shock, and she stared at Jin's hand on her arm like it was on fire. Then she spoke, and Jin's world changed forever. Her voice was musical but shaking as she said words that would haunt him for months to come. Jin stared at Princess Naya in complete confusion. The words she had just spoken made no sense to him at all. Marriage? Laws? What was she talking about? All he had done was help her when she was about to fall. That was just basic human decency, something any person would do for another person in trouble. The princess looked just as shocked as he felt. But there was something else in her expression too, something that looked almost like sadness or resignation, as if she had been expecting something terrible to happen, and now it finally had. "I don't understand," Jin said carefully, very aware that dozens of alien eyes were watching his every move. "What law? What marriage? I was just trying to help you." Princess Naya took a deep breath and gestured for him to follow her away from the crowd of staring Velthari nobles. They walked to a quiet corner of the crystal platform where they could speak privately. Jin noticed that none of the other aliens came close to them now. In fact, they all seemed to be keeping their distance, whispering among themselves in voices too low for him to hear, Captain Jin, the princess began, her musical voice heavy with emotion, you must understand that what just happened between us was not a simple touch. In the eyes of my people, in the eyes of our most sacred laws, you have just bound yourself to me in marriage. Jin felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. That's impossible. I barely know you. We just met 5 minutes ago. How can touching someone's arm mean marriage? The princess sat down gracefully on a bench made of smooth blue crystal and motioned for him to sit beside her. Jin hesitated for a moment, then realized that if they were supposedly engaged now, sitting together probably wouldn't make things any worse. Let me tell you about my people's history, Princess Naya said, staring out at the crystal city below them. Long ago, thousands of years before your species even learned to make fire, the Velthari were very different than we are now. We could speak to each other through touch alone. When two Velthari touched skin to skin, they could share thoughts, emotions, memories, even dreams. Jin listened carefully, trying to understand how this ancient history connected to his current impossible situation. Because touch was so powerful for us, the princess continued, it became sacred. Only family members, close friends, and married couples were allowed to touch each other. If someone touched another person without permission, it was considered a terrible crime. It meant they were forcing their way into that person's mind and heart without being invited. But that was thousands of years ago, Jin protested. You said your people evolved beyond that ability. Surely the laws would have changed too. Princess Naya shook her head sadly. Our physical abilities changed, yes. We can no longer share thoughts through touch. But our laws, our traditions, our beliefs about the sacred nature of physical contact, these things are written in crystal itself. They cannot be changed or broken, not even by the emperor himself. Jin felt a chill run down his spine. What exactly does this law say? It says that any unmarried person who touches another unmarried person of different social standing without formal permission has created a binding engagement contract. The touch itself is considered a declaration of intent to marry. Once made, this contract cannot be broken except by death or by mutual agreement to face exile. The word exile hit Jin like a physical blow. Exile? What happens if we don't go through with this marriage? If we refuse to marry, Princess Naya said quietly, I will be stripped of my title and banished from Velthara forever. I will lose my family, my home, my entire identity, and your people will be held responsible for dishonoring the royal family. The consequences could include the end of all diplomatic relations between our worlds, possibly even war. Jin put his head in his hands. This was a nightmare. He had come here to build bridges between humanity and the Velthari. Instead, his simple act of human kindness had created an interstellar incident that could destroy both their civilizations. There has to be another way, he said desperately. Some kind of exception or loophole. Princess Naya was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. There is one possibility, but it is dangerous and uncertain. The trial of resonance. The news of Jin's accidental engagement spread through both the human diplomatic team and the Velthari court like wildfire. Within hours, Jin found himself sitting in the most uncomfortable meeting of his entire life. Ambassador Park Hana, the head of the human delegation, paced back and forth in the crystal guest quarters they had been given. Her face was red with anger and frustration. This is exactly the kind of disaster we were trying to avoid, she said, for the 10th time. How could you be so careless, Jin? Do you have any idea what this means for Earth? Jin slumped in his chair, feeling worse with every word. I was trying to help her. She was falling. What was I supposed to do? Just let her get hurt? Yes, Ambassador Park shouted. That's exactly what you should have done. Let her fall. Let her guards catch her. Let anyone else help her except you. Now we have an interstellar incident on our hands. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, Princess Naya was facing her own angry family members. Her younger brother, Prince Kale, was furious, his usually calm blue skin flickering with angry red patches. You should have been more careful, sister. Now you're bound to some primitive alien who doesn't even understand our most basic customs. Emperor Vex, Naya's father, was quieter, but somehow more frightening in his disappointment. This engagement puts our entire civilization at risk, he said in his deep, resonant voice. If this human captain cannot adapt to our ways, if he cannot prove himself worthy of our royal bloodline, the people will lose faith in our leadership. But the law was the law, and neither side could change what had happened. According to Velthari tradition, Jin and Naya now had to spend time together every day for at least 30 Earth days. This was called the courtship of understanding, a period where engaged couples were supposed to learn about each other before making their final wedding vows. The first few days were incredibly awkward. Jin had been given a small apartment in the Crystal Palace, but everything felt wrong to him. The furniture was too tall, the bed was too hard, and the food tasted like flowers mixed with metal. He missed simple things like hamburgers, coffee, and chairs that were actually designed for human bodies. Princess Naya, meanwhile, was struggling to understand the most basic things about human culture. Jin had shown her pictures of Earth on his electronic tablet, and she couldn't believe how crowded and noisy human cities looked. "How do you concentrate with so many people around you all the time?" she asked. "Where do you go when you need silence to think?" "Most humans like being around other people," Jin explained. "We feel lonely when we're by ourselves too much. We get energy from talking and laughing with others." This was completely opposite to Velthari culture, where solitude and quiet meditation were considered the highest forms of personal development. Naya spent hours each day in silent reflection, something that made Jin feel restless and bored. Their daily lessons were like culture shock in reverse. Jin tried to learn the complex hand gestures that Velthari used for formal communication, but his human fingers felt clumsy and awkward compared to the graceful movements that came naturally to Naya. She tried to understand human concepts like democracy and individual freedom, ideas that seemed chaotic and dangerous to someone raised in a society built on rigid hierarchy and tradition. "Your people choose their own leaders?" Naya asked in amazement during one of their afternoon talks. "But how do you know they're qualified? What if they make terrible decisions?" "Sometimes they do," Jin admitted, "but we believe people have the right to make their own mistakes and learn from them. Even if it's messy and complicated, we think freedom is worth the risk." Naya found this concept both fascinating and terrifying. In her world, everyone knew exactly what their role was supposed to be from the moment they were born. She had been trained since childhood to be a perfect princess, to always say the right thing and never show weakness or uncertainty. Jin, on the other hand, had grown up believing he could become anything he wanted to be. He had chosen to join the space program because he loved adventure and discovery. The idea of having his entire life planned out for him seemed like a prison. Despite their differences, something unexpected began to happen during their mandatory time together. Jin started to appreciate the beauty and wisdom in Velthari traditions, even if he didn't always understand them. Naya began to admire Jin's practical approach to problem solving and his refusal to give up when things got difficult. 2. Weeks into their forced courtship, Jin was beginning to understand that nothing on Velthara was quite what it seemed. The beautiful crystal palace that had amazed him on his first day now felt different. He noticed cracks in some of the walls that the Velthari tried to hide with decorative panels. The glowing crystal trees in the royal gardens seemed dimmer than they had before, and some of them had stopped glowing entirely. Jin was walking through the palace corridors late one evening when he heard voices coming from the Emperor's private study. The door was slightly open, and through the gap he could see Emperor Vex standing at a large window, looking out at the crystal city below. The Emperor's usually proud shoulders were slumped with what looked like exhaustion or defeat. "Your Majesty," Jin said softly, knocking on the door frame. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Emperor Vex turned around and Jin was shocked by what he saw. The Emperor's face, which always appeared strong and confident in public, now looked tired and worried. His crystal-like skin, which should have been glowing with health, seemed dull and greyish. "Captain Jin," the Emperor said, gesturing for him to come inside. "Perhaps it is time we had an honest conversation." Jin stepped into the study, which was filled with charts, maps, and scientific instruments that he didn't recognize. Many of the papers scattered across the Emperor's desk were covered with numbers and calculations that looked urgent and serious. "I need to tell you something," Emperor Vex said, closing the door behind them. "Something that my daughter doesn't even No yet. Something that no human has ever been told. Jin felt his stomach tighten with worry. What is it, Your Majesty? The Emperor walked over to a large crystal display that showed a three-dimensional image of planet Velthara. As Jin watched, the Emperor touched different parts of the display, and sections of the planet began glowing red like warning signals. Our world is dying, Captain Jin, the Emperor said quietly. Has been dying for over a century now. The atmosphere that once sustained our people is slowly changing. The gases that our crystalline biology needs to survive are being replaced by compounds that are poisonous to us. Jin stared at the display in horror. Nearly half of the planet was now glowing red with danger zones. How is that possible? Your cities look so beautiful and advanced. We have become very good at hiding our problems, the Emperor said bitterly. The crystal technology that makes our cities glow also filters the air we breathe, but the filters are becoming less effective every year. Our scientists estimate that within 50 years, maybe less, Velthara will be completely uninhabitable for our people. The weight of this revelation hit Jin like a physical blow. That's why you wanted to make contact with humanity. You're looking for new worlds where your people can live. Emperor Vex nodded slowly. We had hoped that diplomatic relations with Earth might lead to discussions about relocation possibilities. Your species has proven remarkably adaptable to different environments. We thought perhaps we could learn from you, or even find ways to share worlds that could support both our peoples, but not through a forced marriage between your daughter and me, Jin said, understanding the full scope of the disaster his simple touch had created. Exactly, the Emperor said. A political marriage born from an accident is not the foundation for the kind of partnership our peoples will need to survive. It creates obligations and resentments that could poison any future cooperation, Jin sat down heavily in one of the crystal chairs. Everything made sense now. The worried looks he had seen on Velthari faces, the urgent whispered conversations that stopped whenever he came near, the way even the youngest Velthari children seemed to carry a sadness that was too deep for their age. Does Princess Naya know about any of this? He asked. She knows our world faces challenges, the Emperor said carefully, but she doesn't know how serious the situation has become. I've been trying to protect her from the full truth, perhaps foolishly. That evening, Jin found Princess Naya in her favorite spot, a small balcony overlooking the crystal gardens. She was sitting quietly as she often did, but tonight she seemed more troubled than usual. Jin, she said when she saw him approaching, I've been thinking about our conversations, about the differences between our peoples. What about them? Jin asked, sitting beside her on the crystal bench. You spoke about freedom, about choosing your own path in life, she said, her purple eyes reflecting the starlight. I have been wondering what that would feel like. Jin looked at her carefully. What do you mean? Princess Naya was quiet for a long moment before answering. I have never made a single important decision for myself. Every day of my life has been planned by others. What I wear, what I eat, who I speak to, how I spend my time, even who I was supposed to marry someday. Everything has always been decided based on what is best for my people, never what I might want for myself. And what do you want? Jin asked gently. I want to see other worlds, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to learn about different ways of living. I want to make mistakes and learn from them, like you described. But I can't have any of those things because I am a princess, and my duty is to sacrifice my own desires for the good of Velthara, Jin realized that both he and Princess Naya were trapped by circumstances beyond their control, but for very different reasons. 3 weeks into their engagement, Jin thought he was finally getting used to life on Velthara. He had learned to eat the flour-flavored food without making faces, and he could even manage some of the basic Velthari hand gestures without looking completely awkward. The daily walks with Princess Naya through the crystal gardens had become something he actually looked forward to rather than dreaded. That's why he didn't notice anything wrong at first when they began their usual evening stroll through the palace grounds. The gardens were as beautiful as always, with crystal flowers that chimed softly in the breeze and pathways that glowed beneath their feet. Princess Naya seemed more relaxed than usual, actually smiling as she told him about the different types of crystal plants and how they grew. "This one is my favorite," she said, stopping beside a tall tree with branches that looked like frozen lightning. "When I was little, I used to climb it to hide from my tutors when I didn't want to practice my royal lessons." Jin tried to picture the elegant princess as a mischievous child scrambling up crystal branches. "I bet you were a handful when you were young. My father says I was the reason he developed grey patches in his hair," Naya laughed, and the sound was like music. That's when Jin heard it, a high-pitched whining sound that seemed to be coming from somewhere above them. He looked up at the sky, expecting to see some kind of Velthari aircraft, but instead saw a flash of bright red light streaking toward them. "Get down," Jin shouted, grabbing Princess Naya's arm and pulling her toward the ground. The red beam. Curve energy hit the crystal tree where they had been standing just seconds before, and the entire tree exploded into thousands of glittering fragments. More red beams began raining down from the sky, each one powerful enough to blast holes in the crystal pathways. Jin rolled behind a large crystal boulder, pulling Princess Naya with him. His heart was pounding as he tried to figure out what was happening. "Who's attacking us?" he asked, looking around desperately for some kind of weapon or shelter. "I don't know," Princess Naya said, but her face had gone pale with understanding. "But I think they're trying to kill you." Before Jin could ask what she meant, another energy beam struck the boulder they were hiding behind, cracking it down the middle. They had to move, but there was nowhere to go. The garden pathways offered no cover, and the palace entrance was too far away. That's when Jin saw them, dark figures moving through the crystal trees on both sides of the garden. Some of them looked human, wearing the black uniforms of Earth's military. Others were clearly Velthari, their crystalline skin reflecting the light from their energy weapons. "It's both of our peoples," Jin realized with horror. "Humans and Velthari working together to stop this engagement. They think if you die, the marriage contract will be void," Princess Naya said. "They believe it's the only way to prevent a disaster between our civilizations." Another energy blast shattered the remains of their crystal shelter. Jin grabbed Princess Naya's hand and ran toward a cluster of crystal bushes, but he could hear footsteps getting closer behind them. The attackers were closing in from all directions. "This way," Princess Naya said, leading him toward a narrow path between two crystal walls. But as they rounded the corner, Jin saw more armed figures waiting for them. There was nowhere left to run. The lead attacker, a human soldier Jin didn't recognize, raised his energy weapon and aimed it directly at Jin's chest. "Sorry, Captain," the soldier said. "Nothing personal, but this engagement has to end." Jin closed his eyes and waited for the energy blast that would end his life. But instead of pain, he felt Princess Naya slam into him from the side, knocking him to the ground just as the weapon fired. The energy beam hit Princess Naya instead, striking her directly in the back. But instead of killing her, something amazing happened. Her crystalline skin absorbed the energy and scattered it in all directions, like light hitting a prism. The deadly beam broke apart into harmless sparkles that rained down around them like glitter. "The princess," one of the Velthari attackers shouted in their musical language. "We hit the princess." But Princess Naya wasn't hurt. Her skin was glowing, brighter than Jin had ever seen it, as if the energy weapon had somehow charged her up instead of harming her. She stood up slowly, placing herself between Jin and all the attackers. "You will not harm him," she said, her voice carrying a power and authority that Jin had never heard before. "I am Princess Naya of Velthara, and this human is under my protection." The attackers hesitated, clearly not expecting their target to be defended by the very person they thought they were trying to save. In that moment of confusion, palace guards came running from all directions, surrounding the would-be assassins and taking them into custody. As the immediate danger passed, Jin stared at Princess Naya in amazement. She had risked her own life to save his, even though their engagement was something neither of them had chosen. Even though she barely knew him, she had been willing to die for him. "Why?" Jin asked, as palace medics checked them both for injuries. "Why did you do that?" Princess Naya looked at him with those deep purple eyes, and for the first time, Jin saw past the royal training and formal manners to the real person underneath. Because it was the right thing to do, she said simply. And because I'm beginning to think that maybe this accident of ours isn't entirely a disaster after all. After the assassination attempt, everything changed between Jin and Princess Naya. The attack had shaken both of them, but it had also revealed something important. When faced with real danger, they had instinctively protected each other. Still, neither of them was ready to accept that they were truly meant to be married to a complete stranger from another world. That's when Princess Naya remembered the ancient law she had mentioned weeks earlier, the trial of resonance. It was their one chance to prove they were incompatible and dissolve the engagement legally without anyone facing exile or dishonor. The trial hasn't been used in over 300 years, Princess Naya explained to Jin as they sat in the palace. Library surrounded by ancient crystal tablets covered in Velthari writing. It was created for situations exactly like ours, when political or accidental engagements needed to be tested. Jin studied the glowing symbols on the tablets, wishing he could read them himself. What exactly does this trial involve? 3. Tests, Princess Naya said, her finger tracing the ancient words. The first test measures emotional harmony, whether two people can understand and support each other's feelings. The second test examines intellectual partnership, how well they can work together to solve problems. The third test is the most difficult, a spiritual connection that goes beyond the physical world. And if we fail these tests, Jin asked, then we will have proven to everyone that we are truly incompatible, and the engagement will be dissolved with honor intact for both our peoples. Jin felt a mixture of relief and something else he couldn't quite identify. Maybe it was disappointment. He pushed that thought away. Of course he wanted to end this engagement. He barely knew Princess Naya, and he certainly hadn't chosen to marry her. The trial was scheduled for the following week, giving them time to prepare. But as the days passed, Jin found himself spending even more time with Princess Naya, and not just because the law required it. He was beginning to genuinely enjoy her company. She had a quick wit that caught him off guard, and she asked questions about human culture that made him think about his own world in new ways. When she laughed at his stories about life on Earth, her whole face lit up with genuine joy. That was nothing like the formal princess mask she wore in public. The first test took place in a circular chamber deep within the palace. Jin and Princess Naya sat facing each other on crystal cushions, while ancient Velthari elders watched from the shadows. The test began when a series of crystal panels around the room began glowing with different colors. Each color represents a different emotion, Princess Naya whispered to Jin. We must match the emotions we see with the emotions we feel in each other. At first, Jin had no idea what he was supposed to do. The colors meant nothing to him, and he couldn't tell what Princess Naya was feeling just by looking at her. But as the test continued, something strange began to happen. When the panels glowed with warm golden light, he felt calm and peaceful, and he noticed that Princess Naya's breathing had become slow and relaxed. When the panels shifted to deep blue, Jin felt a wave of sadness, and he saw tears forming in Princess Naya's eyes. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand, offering comfort. She squeezed his fingers gratefully, and the blue light grew brighter. By the end of the first test, they were moving in perfect synchronization, their emotions rising and falling together like a dance. The elders murmured among themselves in surprise. This was not what they had expected to see. The second test was completely different. Jin and Princess Naya were taken to a room filled with mechanical puzzles and complex crystal machines that neither of them had ever seen before. Their task was to work together to solve a series of increasingly difficult problems. Jin's human engineering background proved useful for understanding how the machines worked, but Princess Naya's knowledge of Velthari crystal technology was essential for actually operating them. When Jin got frustrated with a particularly stubborn puzzle, Princess Naya would calmly suggest a different approach. When she became overwhelmed by the complexity of a problem, Jin would break it down into smaller, manageable pieces. Try rotating that crystal 90 degrees, Princess Naya suggested during one especially challenging puzzle. That's brilliant, Jin said, making the adjustment. Now if we channel the energy through this pathway, it should activate the resonance chamber, Princess Naya finished, and they watched in satisfaction as the ancient machine hummed to life. They completed every puzzle the elders gave them, working together so seamlessly that it looked like they had been partners for years rather than weeks. Once again, the watching elders seemed surprised and slightly troubled by what they were witnessing. The third and final test was the most mysterious. Jin and Princess Naya were taken to a meditation chamber where they were asked to sit quietly and simply be present with each other. No words, no tasks, no goals except to exist in the same space and see what happened. Jin had never been good at meditation. His human mind was always busy, always thinking about problems to solve or things to do. But sitting across from Princess Naya in the peaceful crystal chamber, he found his thoughts gradually slowing down. As the minutes passed, Jin became aware of Princess Naya's presence in a way that had nothing to do with sight or sound. He could sense her calm strength, her deep love for her people, and her hidden longing for adventure and freedom. Somehow, without words or touch, he could feel who she really was beneath all the royal training and formal behavior. When the test ended and they opened their eyes, both Jin and Princess Naya looked stunned. They had connected on a level that neither of them had thought possible with someone from a completely different world. The eldest of the Velthari judges stood up slowly, his ancient face grave with the weight of what he had witnessed. "The trial is complete," he announced, "but the results are not what anyone expected." The eldest judge's words hung in the air like a challenge. Jin and Princess Naya had passed all 3 tests of the trial of resonance, but instead of proving their incompatibility, they had shown the exact opposite. The watching elders were clearly disturbed by this unexpected outcome. "There is one final test," the eldest judge announced, his ancient voice echoing in the crystal chamber. "The trial of depths. It was not part of the original plan, but given these unusual results, the full council believes it is necessary." Jin felt his stomach drop. "What kind of test?" The judge's expression was grave. "You must enter the crystal caverns beneath the palace and retrieve the heart of resonance, an ancient crystal that has been lost in the depths for centuries. Only by working together in the most dangerous environment our world has to offer can you truly prove whether your bond is real or merely an illusion created by the controlled conditions of the previous tests." Princess Naya's face went pale. "The crystal caverns have been sealed for over 100 years. They're unstable and dangerous. People have died down there. Which is precisely why this test will reveal the truth," the judge replied. "If your connection is genuine, you will find a way to survive together. If not..." He didn't need to finish. The sentence. 2 hours later, Jin found himself standing at the entrance to a tunnel that descended deep into the crystal bedrock beneath the palace. The opening was barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side, and the walls glowed with an eerie blue-green light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Princess Naya stood beside him, wearing practical crystal armor instead of her usual flowing robes. She carried a small device that looked like a crystal compass, which she explained would help them navigate the maze of tunnels below. "Are you ready for this?" Jin asked, checking his own equipment one final time. He had a human-made flashlight, some basic tools, and a supply of water and energy bars. "No," Princess Naya admitted, "but I don't think we have a choice." They began their descent into the caverns, following a narrow path that wound deeper and deeper into the planet's core. The crystal walls around them were beautiful, but unsettling, covered with formations that looked almost like frozen screams or reaching hands. The air grew warmer as they went deeper, and Jin could hear the distant sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. "The heart of resonance should be in the central chamber," Princess Naya said, consulting her crystal compass. "According to the old maps, it's about 2 kilometers down and through a series of connecting tunnels." They walked in relative silence for the first hour, both focused on navigating the increasingly complex maze of passages. Some tunnels were so narrow they had to turn sideways to squeeze through, while others opened into vast chambers filled with crystal formations that towered overhead like frozen waterfalls. Jin was beginning to think that maybe this final test wouldn't be so bad after all, when the ground beneath their feet began to shake. It started as a small tremor, barely noticeable, but within seconds, the shaking became violent, and the crystal walls around them began to crack and groan. Chunks of crystal fell from the ceiling, shattering on the tunnel floor with sounds like breaking glass. "Earthquake!" Jin shouted, grabbing Princess Naya's arm and pulling her against the wall, as a massive crystal formation crashed down where they had been standing just moments before. The shaking continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it finally stopped, Jin and Princess Naya found themselves in complete darkness. Jin's flashlight had been crushed by falling debris, and the natural glow from the crystal walls had been extinguished by the cave-in. "Naya, are you hurt?" Jin called out, his voice echoing strangely in the darkness. "I'm okay," she replied, though her voice sounded shaky. "But Jin, I think we're trapped." Jin felt around in the darkness until he found her hand. Her skin was cold and trembling, and he could feel her fear. "What do you mean, trapped?" "The tunnel we came through is completely blocked," Princess Naya said. "I can feel the crystal debris piled up behind us and ahead." She paused, and Jin heard her moving around, feeling along the walls. "Ahead, the passage has collapsed too. We're sealed in this chamber." The reality of their situation hit Jin like a physical blow. They were trapped underground with no way out, no way to communicate with the surface, and no one knew exactly where they were in the maze of tunnels. The air in the sealed chamber wouldn't last forever. "Don't panic," Jin said, as much to himself as to Princess Naya. "There has to be another way out. These caverns are ancient, right? There must be multiple passages." For the next several hours, they searched every inch of the chamber in complete darkness, feeling along the walls for any crack or opening that might lead to another tunnel. Jin's human determination kept him going even when the situation seemed hopeless, while Princess Naya's Velthari resilience helped her stay calm and methodical in their search. "Here," Princess Naya said suddenly. "I found something. There's a small opening near the floor, but it's partially blocked by debris." Jin crawled over to where her voice was coming from and felt around until he found the opening she was talking about. It was barely large enough for a person to squeeze through, and it was filled with loose crystal fragments. "I can clear this," Jin said, using his hands to carefully move the debris. "It's going to take time, but I think we can make it big enough to crawl through." They worked together in the darkness, taking turns clearing debris and encouraging each other when the work seemed impossible. Jin's practical problem-solving skills, combined with Princess Naya's patient, methodical approach, proved to be exactly what they needed. As they worked, they talked to keep their spirits up and their minds off the danger they were in. Jin told Princess Naya about his childhood on Earth, his dreams of exploring space, and his fears about being trapped so far from home. She shared stories about growing up in the Crystal Palace, her secret wishes to see other worlds, and her struggle to balance duty with personal desires. "I've never told anyone about wanting to leave Velthara," she admitted as they took a break from digging. "It felt like betraying my people." "It's not betrayal to want something for yourself," Jin said gently. "You can love your people and still want to explore the universe." After what felt like an eternity, they finally cleared enough debris to crawl through the opening. On the other side, they found themselves in a new tunnel that glowed faintly with its own light. More importantly, they could feel fresh air moving through the passage. "This way leads up," Princess Naya said, consulting her compass. "We might actually make it out of here." As they climbed toward the surface, supporting each other when the path became difficult, Jin realized that something fundamental had changed between them. In the darkness and danger of the caverns, they had learned to trust each other completely. They had become true partners. When Jin and Princess Naya finally emerged from the crystal caverns, the first thing that hit them was the brilliant sunlight of Velthara's twin stars. After hours in complete darkness underground, the light was almost blinding. The second thing Jin noticed was the crowd of worried faces waiting for them at the cavern entrance. Emperor Vex rushed forward, his usually composed royal demeanor completely forgotten as he embraced his daughter. "Naya, we thought you were lost forever. The earthquake sealed the main entrance and our rescue teams couldn't find any way to reach you." Ambassador Park was there too, looking more relieved than Jin had ever seen her. "Captain Jin, thank goodness you're safe. When we felt that tremor and saw the cavern entrance collapse, we feared the worst." Jin and Princess Naya looked at each other, both covered in crystal dust, and exhausted from their underground ordeal. They had been through something that neither the Emperor nor the Ambassador could truly understand. In those dark hours beneath the palace, something had changed between them that went far beyond the artificial engagement created by ancient laws. "Did you find it?" asked the eldest judge, stepping forward with obvious curiosity. "Did you retrieve the Heart of Resonance?" Princess Naya reached into her crystal armor and pulled out a glowing gem about the size of a human fist. The Heart of Resonance pulsed with soft rainbow light, and Jin could feel warmth radiating from it, even from several feet away. The crowd of Velthari nobles gasped in amazement. The heart had been lost for centuries, and many had believed it was just a legend. Its recovery was nothing short of miraculous. "The trial is complete," the eldest judge announced. "You have passed every test we could devise. But now you face the most important choice of all." Jin knew what he meant. According to Velthari law, he and Princess Naya had proven their compatibility beyond any doubt. But that didn't mean they had to go through with the marriage. They could still choose to dissolve the engagement and return to their separate lives. "We need time to think," Princess Naya said quietly. "Time to decide what we really want." That evening, Jin and Princess Naya sat together in her favorite spot on the crystal balcony, watching the stars appear in Velthara's purple sky. They had been through so much together in just a few weeks, yet Jin felt like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "We could end this," Princess Naya said softly. "We could tell everyone that despite passing the trials, we've decided we're not truly compatible. No one would question our decision after what we've been through." Jin nodded. "We could go back to our original lives. You could continue being a princess and I could return to Earth to continue my diplomatic mission. Is that what you want?" she asked, turning to look at him with those deep purple eyes. Jin was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything that had happened since that first day when he had caught her arm on the crystal steps. A month ago, I would have said yes, without hesitation. But now? "Now?" Princess Naya prompted. "Now I think we have an opportunity to do something incredible," Jin said, his voice growing more excited as the idea took shape in his mind. "Not because some ancient law says we have to, but because we choose to." Princess Naya frowned. "What do you mean?" Jin stood up and began pacing, the way he always did when he was working through a complex problem. "Your father told me about Velthara's atmospheric problems. Your people need new worlds to survive. At the same time, humanity is still learning how to explore space efficiently. We could help each other. But that doesn't require us to get married," Princess Naya pointed out. "No, it doesn't," Jin agreed. "But think about what we could accomplish as partners. Not just diplomatic partners, but real partners who understand each other's cultures and can bridge the gap between our peoples." Jin sat back down beside her and took her hands in his. "I'm not talking about a political marriage or an obligation we're stuck with. I'm talking about choosing to build something together because we want to." Princess Naya's eyes widened as she began to understand what he was suggesting. "You mean a real marriage, based on our own feelings instead of ancient laws?" "Only if that's what you want," Jin said quickly. "I know this is crazy. We've only known each other for a few weeks. But Naya, when we were trapped in those caverns, when everything was dark and dangerous, I realized something important." "What?" "I realized that I trust you completely. More than that, I care about what happens to you. I want to help you explore other worlds like you've always dreamed of doing. I want to work with you to find new homes for your people and share Velthari wisdom with humanity." Princess Naya was quiet for a long time, staring out at the crystal city below them. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've spent my entire life doing what other people expected of me. I've never once made a choice based on what I actually wanted." "And what do you want?" Jin asked gently. She turned to face him, and Jin saw something in her expression that he had never seen before. It wasn't the dutiful princess or the reluctant bride to be. It was just Naya making her own decision for the first time in her life. "I want to choose you," she said. "Not because the law says I have to, not because it's good for our peoples, but because in those dark tunnels, I realized that I care about you too. I want to see what we could build together if we were truly free to choose." Jin felt his heart racing. "Are you sure? This changes everything. There would be no going back to the way things were. Princess Naya smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Jin had ever seen. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning they would announce their decision to both their peoples. They would choose marriage, but on their own terms, as the foundation for a new kind of alliance between humanity and the Velthari. 1 year later, Jin stood in front of a mirror in his quarters aboard the spaceship New Seoul, adjusting his wedding clothes for what felt like the 100th time. He wore a combination of human formal wear and Velthari ceremonial robes, the crystal fabric shimmering with soft light as he moved. In just a few hours, he would marry Princess Naya in a ceremony that would be watched by billions of people across 2 different worlds. "You look nervous," said Captain Park, who had arrived early to help Jin prepare. She had been promoted to lead the joint human-Velthari diplomatic mission, a job that had become much easier once the 2 species started working together instead of just trying to understand each other. "I am nervous," Jin admitted, running his hands through his hair. "A year ago I was just a regular space captain. Now I'm about to become part of an alien royal family and help establish the first interstellar colonies in human history." Through the window of his quarters, Jin could see the most amazing sight in the galaxy. 2 massive space stations hung in orbit around a beautiful blue-green planet that had been chosen as the site for the first joint human-Velthari colony. One station was built using human technology, all metal and glass and sharp angles. The other was grown using Velthari crystal techniques, flowing and organic with walls that pulsed with gentle light. Between the 2 stations, smaller ships moved, back and forth constantly, carrying supplies, people and equipment needed to start the new colony on the planet below. Some ships were human-built, others were Velthari, and a few were experimental hybrid vessels that combined both technologies in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. "The colonists are already calling it New Harmony," Captain Park said, following Jin's gaze to the planet below. "The first joint settlement is scheduled to be operational within 6 months. Jin smiled, thinking about how much had changed since that first awkward day on Velthara, when he had accidentally started this whole adventure. The atmospheric problems on Velthara had grown worse, just as Emperor Vex had predicted, but now there was hope. 3 suitable planets had been identified where Velthari refugees could relocate, and human engineers were working with Velthari scientists to develop new atmospheric processing technologies. "Time to go," Captain Park announced. "Your bride is waiting." The wedding ceremony took place in the main hall of the Velthari space station, a vast crystal chamber that had been decorated with flowers from both Earth and Velthara. Representatives from dozens of human worlds sat alongside Velthari nobles, all of them witnessing this historic moment. Jin walked down an aisle made of polished crystal that reflected light in rainbow patterns across the walls. At the end of the aisle stood Princess Naya, and Jin's breath caught in his throat when he saw her. She wore a wedding dress that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, flowing around her like captured moonbeams. Her hair was adorned with tiny crystal flowers that chimed softly as she moved, and her purple eyes sparkled with joy. But what struck Jin most was the expression on her face. Gone was the dutiful princess who had been resigned to an unwanted marriage. In her place stood a woman who had chosen her own path, someone who radiated confidence and happiness in a way that made everyone around her smile. The ceremony itself was unlike anything that had ever been performed before. They exchanged vows in both human and Velthari languages, promising not just to love and honor each other, but to work together as bridges between their peoples. Instead of traditional wedding rings, they exchanged crystals that had been grown specifically for them, gems that would glow brighter when they were together and pulse with gentle light when they were apart. Emperor Vex, who had become much more relaxed and happy over the past year, performed the Velthari part of the ceremony. Ambassador Park handled the human traditions. When they finally kissed as husband and wife, both space stations erupted in celebration, with humans cheering and Velthari creating musical harmonies that made the crystal walls sing. After the ceremony, Jin and Naya stood together on the observation deck of the station, looking down at the planet that would soon be home to thousands of people from both their species. Ships were already landing on the surface, and tiny lights were beginning to appear where the first settlements were being built. "Do you ever regret it?" Naya asked, taking Jin's hand in hers. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had just let me fall that day?" Jin thought about it seriously for a moment. A year ago, his biggest worry had been whether he could successfully complete a diplomatic mission. Now he was married to an alien princess, helping to establish interstellar colonies and working to solve environmental crises on a galactic scale. His life had become infinitely more complicated. "Never," he said firmly, squeezing her hand. "That accidental touch was the best mistake I ever made." Naya laughed, the sound like crystal bells in the wind. "It wasn't really an accident, you know. I could have caught myself on those steps. I was just curious about what would happen if I let the kind human captain help me." Jin stared at her in amazement. "You mean you fell on purpose?" "Maybe," she said, with a mischievous smile that reminded him of the child who used to climb crystal trees to avoid her royal lessons. Sometimes the best adventures start with a little bit of carefully planned chaos. As they watched their two peoples working together to build something completely new, Jin realized that Princess Naya had been right. Sometimes the most important moments in life came from unexpected kindness, accidental touches, and the courage to choose love over fear. Down on the planet below, the lights of new harmony grew brighter as human determination and Velthari wisdom combined to create something that neither species could have built alone. And it all started with one simple human instinct: to help someone who was falling.